Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring a genuinely paradigm-shifting, wildly optimistic approach to personal change called Solution-Focused Brief Therapy, or SFBT. If you've ever felt like, digging endlessly through your past to try and fix your future is just exhausting, and sometimes even counterproductive, you're going to absolutely love the concepts we're outlining today. We're going to break down exactly how this revolutionary toolkit empowers people to engineer a much better tomorrow, simply by focusing on what they're already doing right. Okay, let's dive into this. Just look at this incredible quote from Dr. Naima Fatima Sharif's presentation. It completely flips traditional psychology right on its head. For so long, therapy was this strictly problem-focused discipline, right? It was totally obsessed with analyzing maladjustment and basically asking, well, what's wrong with you? But this quote, it perfectly captures the core philosophy of SFBT. It operates on this profound, competence-based belief that you already have the innate strengths required to heal. Your positive qualities, what is right with you, are actually the exact tools that are going to fix your struggles.
All right, Section 1, the solution-focused shift.
So this whole approach was developed back in the 1980s by a pioneering team of family therapists spearheaded by Steve Shazer and Insoo Berg at the Brief Therapy Center in the US. And what they did was honestly revolutionary. They effectively shifted the entire psychological focus away from relentlessly analyzing a client's past, and instead, they directed all that energy toward engineering a goal-oriented future. They basically realized that you don't necessarily need to understand all the complex, murky origins of a problem in order to actually solve it.
And this brilliantly illustrates the striking contrast between these two mindsets. Just look at the problem-focused question here. How long have you been depressed? It totally anchors the client right in their history and their pain. Now look at the solution-focused question. What would your life be like if you weren't depressed? Boom! Immediately, the brain is forced to vividly imagine a positive, solved future. It completely bypasses the trauma of the past and right away starts building a framework for what a better tomorrow actually looks like.
Moving right along, Section 2, Core Therapy Assumptions.
Notice how incredibly empowering this list is. In this model, therapists don't act like these all-knowing authority figures dictating answers from their own playbook. Instead, they operate on the assumption that the client is the ultimate expert of their own life. The therapist assumes that change is constant, and more importantly, that clients already possess this deep memory bank of solutions inside them. The therapist's job isn't to hand out advice. The job is to help the client tap into the resources and strengths they already have, knowing full well that even the smallest little changes are going to inevitably snowball into much bigger life transformations.
Which brings us to the delightfully straightforward, highly pragmatic motto of the entire approach. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Once you know what works, do it more. If it doesn't work, do something different. It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? Like some folksy advice your grandpa would give you. But honestly, the actual mechanics of behavioral change really can be this simple. Stop doing what fails and double down on what succeeds.
Section 3. Setting realistic client goals.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the visual metaphor of stacking blocks here. In SFBT, you don't set massive, vague, overwhelming goals like, I want to be perfectly happy forever. That's just impossible to measure. Instead, goals absolutely must be small, realistic, and highly concrete. They're behavioral. You build your preferred future incrementally, literally one single block at a time. The therapist is there to help you define exactly what that first, tiny, achievable block looks like.
All right, on to Section 4, the Interventions Toolkit.
Let's actually try one of these techniques together. I want to act as your therapist for a moment, guiding you through what's known as Erickson's crystal ball. I want you to look into the future to a very specific date where your current problem is completely 100% solved. Got it? Okay, now keeping that solved future firmly in mind, let's work backwards. What happened a few months prior to that date to get you there? What early steps did you take a few weeks prior? By essentially time traveling to a successful future and working backwards to the present day, the path forward suddenly just reveals itself.
Another amazing tool is O'Hanlon's videotape question. He'd sit down and ask, if we watched a videotape of your life in the future, what would you be doing that shows things are better? This is so clever because it forces the client to move away from these abstract feelings and instead visualize specific, observable behavioral changes. What exactly would the camera see? How are you walking? Who are you talking to? What are you actively doing differently that an outside observer would instantly notice?
And then we arrive at perhaps the most famous intervention of them all, Shazer's miracle question. I really want you to absorb this one.
Suppose that tonight, while you're asleep, a miracle happens. The problem that is bothering you the very most right now is entirely solved. But because you are sound asleep, you don't know the miracle has happened. When you wake up tomorrow morning, what will be the very first difference you notice that tells you the miracle has taken place? What else will be different?
Next up, Section 5, Coping, Scaling, and Exceptions.
So when a client is totally overwhelmed, practitioners use coping questions. They might say something like, "This problem feels so incredibly difficult, yet you still managed to get out of bed and get here today. What got you here?" This acts as a brilliant way to cheerlead the client. It completely shifts their perspective from feeling totally defeated to realizing, hey, I'm already successfully surviving my toughest struggles. It validates their pain while simultaneously spotlighting their incredible resilience.
Let's move to and see how this builds with scaling questions. The therapist will ask you to rate exactly where you are on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being your ultimate goal. So let's say you're at a 3. The magic of this approach is that the therapist does not ask how to jump all the way to a 10. They just ask what will help you move up one single point to a 4. It is highly, highly incremental. The focus is solely on achieving the very next manageable step.
Then, we've got exception questions. This involves identifying the good times by asking, tell me about a time when this problem doesn't happen, or maybe it just happens less. By hunting down these exceptions, you actively amplify the moments when the client is already succeeding. You're effectively changing their internal narrative from this dark story of constant dysfunction to an empowering story of proven capability. You already know how to beat the problem because you've actually already done it during these exception periods.
Okay, to wrap up the toolkit, here are Shazer's skeleton keys. These are the essential, super simple rules to keep that positive momentum rolling. Number 1, observe what works between now and your next session. Number 2, if things aren't working, just do something completely different. And number 3, pay really close attention to those exceptions we just talked about. These are rapid-fire, high-energy assignments designed to keep the client actively looking for success in their everyday life. Now, Section 6, Limitations and Criticisms. Looking at this entirely impartially, critics often point out that solution-focused brief therapy can be viewed as too simplistic, noting that it currently lacks the deep, empirical research base you see in much older methodologies. Because it's inherently short-term and actively ignores a client's personal history, it is contraindicated, meaning it's not recommended for highly dependent clients who might really require deeper, long-term support. Furthermore, simply focusing on the positive may not adequately address the root causes of serious, complex mental health issues. So while it's a remarkably powerful tool, it isn't necessarily the perfect fit for absolutely everyone. So the crucial point is that understanding this framework gives you a wildly different lens through which to view your own challenges. We've seen how focusing on innate competence and taking these tiny, incremental steps can completely rewrite your narrative. I want you to think of a persistent problem you're dealing with right now in your own life. Really, picture it. Now ask yourself, when does it not happen? What are you doing differently during those good times? What if the solution you've been desperately searching for is actually hiding right there in what you're already doing right?